I think I spent a good 3, 4 hours a day
Mm.
thinking about how my hair was. This thing was literally, like you said, controlling me and controlling every decision I made.
So y'all, it's probably one of the last videos I'm gonna have on my phone with my hair. We're gonna cut it off.
My hair was always a big thing growing up. I would always be styling my hair. I'd always get like new hair product and stuff. Like for me, when I'm thinking hair loss, I see my dad, he didn't lose his hair until like 28, 29. So like that's not really on the horizon for me at all. I'm not thinking about stuff like that. But I think one time I went to go get my hair cut and my barber's like, oh, like it's like kind of thinning in the back. I didn't put too much thought into it because like you just think my hair's gonna be there forever, right? But I'm like 17, 18 going into this and there's like this little seed that's kind of implanted. So that was when I first kind of realized it. As I'm going from high school to my first year of university, I saw like the front starting to thin a little bit. Like you can kind of
Okay.
see my scalp a tiny bit. I would take pictures and I would see it in the pictures. My hair got a lot thinner, didn't feel as thick as it was before. It didn't look as thick as everyone around me. But no one around me really noticed at this time, right? It was just kind of in my head. And even in
Right.
my head, I would dismiss it. I'm not sure what clicked, but I was like, let me try like the Rogaine or like the minoxidil and the finasteride. I went to my doctor. I was like, I think my hair is thinning a little bit. Is there anything I can do? And that's what they kind of prescribed. This is like my first semester of university. I'm like 18 years old, going into college pretty much, right? At that time, like I'm making sure my hair is good every time I'm leaving the house. Like I'm looking at the mirror. I'm looking at it from the front angle and then I'm looking at it from a side angle. Sometimes like I'd even pull out the camera and see how it looks in the back,
Mm.
make sure it's going a certain way. I would go to the gym and I'd work out and I get sweaty. And then my hair is like, you can kind of like, it'd be thinning a little bit more just because it's wet and there's moisture in there. Like you kind of see it a little bit more. So I'd be thinking about that constantly. One of the big things where I was looking at like renting hair loss is like start early, right?
Yeah.
Start with
Right. Yeah.
all the medication stuff, take care of it as fast as possible. So that was me sort of trying to be proactive about it if I could. But I hated putting that stuff on my head. I hated putting that Rogaine phone in my head. Just having something in my hair every single day. And I think the biggest realization that came from me was that if I want to keep my hair, I had to do that every single day for the rest of my life. And if I didn't, I was going to face the same end that I would face, like if I wasn't doing it, right? And after a few months of that, I didn't consider shaving my head at that time because it's still really early. I was still like in school. Like for me to shave my head at 19, like there's no one else around me that was kind of doing that at that
Right.
time. So that was a little bit tough where I just felt like I was going through this thing and no one else kind of knew what was going on. But I would be super, super self-conscious about going out, right? Meeting new people, meeting new friends. So that was definitely something that was like top of mind. And by the end of first year, I'm constantly thinking about what my hair likes, what
Right.
my hair looks like. Is it wet? Is it raining outside? I was never a hat guy. I just had to style it in certain ways and make sure I was getting my hair cut quite often. And that's when the barbers would be like, oh, there's a little bit going on back there. Like,
Right.
it's like, yeah, I've been aware of that for the past few years, right? Making sure no one could see the back of my head. Like, that was something I would do constantly.
Okay.
The pictures of the back of the head, I think I had like so many at one point where I was like, every day I just like check, like, see what my crown is looking like, see what's looking like up front. I think I sent a couple of those over to you as well, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
constantly just kind of checking. I was a pretty active kid, did a lot of working out, played sports, and I typically sweat a lot too. When I sweat, like that's when I can feel it the most, right? Like I go to the bathroom and I see myself, and like you can see there's a lot of separation through here. I can start to see my scalp. And once I could start to see that, that's when I was like, it's actually happening. That's when I started looking more into hair transplant surgery. Like that's when I got down that rabbit hole. This is something that's going to happen and it's something I want to keep. I can have to address it somehow, right? And my dad, he had done that way back in his day too, right? So that's something he had experience with. He had a transplant when he was
Okay.
younger.
Right.
So like when I bring that up to him, he was obviously a little bit more supportive because he had
Cool.
been through that. But for him, like it never panned out for him either. Like I think he actually had like a hair system at one
Okay.
point. I never want to do that. All that upkeep. It's like this thing was eating at me so much to where I was spending so much of my day thinking about how my hair looks, what I'm putting into it, if I'm going outside, like how it looks to other people. Like I think I spent a good 3, 4 hours a day thinking about how my hair was. Just feels like people notice, but for you, it's just that voice is so loud and it's
Mm.
constantly telling you. And that's when I kind of found your channel as well. Seeing people embrace being bald and it looks good, right? So that was kind of the beginning of getting to that point where I'm like looking at hair transplant surgeries, just evaluating my options. So that was a big time where I'm like, okay, this is also an option. And now my hair is like even more thinner. Like I think that's when you're kind of forced to sit with yourself and you're really criticizing yourself, that's when it started to really get louder. It's like, oh shit, like my hair loss is a real thing and something needs to be done.
Yeah.
Because the last thing I wanted was to like have half my hair be gone and just kind of go through that and know that it gets worse and worse. I wanted to either actually have hair and
Mm.
get a system or get rid of it and not think about it. There was actually a time like I trimmed my head down. It was kind of like a test run. So I was like, let me try this, let me see what it's like. And I remember doing that and it felt really freeing at first.
Mm.
But then like everyone around me was like, you're gonna grow back, right? And I'm like, yeah, I guess I'm only like 20 years old. Like, there's no way I can go bald right now,
Mm.
right? Like that was my whole thinking. It's like there is no one else around me that is my age, that's this young, that's kind of shaved their head. And like everyone, friends, aunts, uncles, family members, they're like, oh, like you're gonna grow it back, right? So I started growing it out and I realized like just because I had shaved it, I had made it look a lot thinner. Like you're actually seeing a lot more of the scalp. You're seeing how far back my hairline actually was, how thin the back of my head was. And like I grew it up for a few months and it looked okay, but I knew for myself like that wasn't what I wanted to deal with.
Sure.
And like when it kind of happened the first time, just the freedom of not having to think about what was going on up here and just understanding is like it's okay. Everyone can see the fact that you're bald and no one really cares. Right.
Mm.
Instead of worrying about, oh snap, does my hairline look like this? How far back does it look? Do I have to put my hair down in a certain way? I think that freedom part of it, it was so priceless because it just opened up so much more like mental bandwidth, is what I
Mm.
like to call it. Like you're not thinking about it. And when you're not thinking about it, you have so much energy to spend on a billion other things that you could be spending it on, right? So that was a big thing for me. And I remember just shaving it off. It was like New Year, like it's typically when stuff like that happens. And that's the video I took right where I just recorded myself and I just remember buzzing it all off and just having the water run through my hair for the first time, run through my head for the first time.
Mm.
I remember my family came home and they were shocked because I didn't tell anyone I was gonna do it. I just did it, right? Um, and I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna keep it. And no one believed me because I did it the first time and I grew it back. And I
Right.
was like, this time, like, no, it's coming off, it's staying off, right? After that, it just got so much easier, right? It wasn't something I thought about. It wasn't like something I had regrets on. I'm so happy with the way I am, right? And for me to even come to that point, it's nice. And that's why, like, when people come to me and they're like thinking about that conversation, especially if they're young, I'm like, there's a certain amount of time you can dedicate to worrying about how you look. And there's a certain amount of freedom that you get from not having to worry about that. And I would choose that freedom every single time. But yeah, when it came to seeing other people for the first time, I think like you said, just being honest. And it was just like if I had a somewhat talking relationship with them, they'd ask why. I'm like, my hair was going. It was either on my terms or on its terms. And I'd rather do things in this world on my terms than anything, right? And that's what gave me a lot of peace in the fact that it's like this thing was literally, like you said, controlling me and controlling every decision I made. And it played a role whether I was going out, it played a role whether I was going to the grocery store or if I was going on a date or wherever I was going. it was like the voice in the back of your head. And for me to get rid of that, that voice is gone. And that's literally the easiest price I'd pay. It felt amazing. And I think once you explain to people like that too, there's like kind of clicks for them. Now where I just kind of shave it and I deal with it. And I feel great because like I said, it's on my terms, it's under my control. And for something that's sort of been eating at me for such a long time, and it was like this thing where it's like literally someone standing over your shoulder asking you about your hair all the time. That's what it kind of felt like, right? And for that person to go away, I think there's no other experience like that. I remember vividly, I remember it was one of the first days I shaved my head and I went to the gym. I came out and it was raining. Didn't have a hat. And I remember the raindrops hitting my head for the first time. I'm like, I used to hate the rain because every time I went out, it would mess up my hair and you could see it. I'm like, this time I was out there, I was walking to my car and I remember standing there and the rain is just hitting my head and it felt so good. For one, just rain to hit my head, but two, not have to worry about that
Yeah.
ever again.
Is there something you kind of did or something you thought, some kind of action in some way that you think was kind of quite influential and really helpful for you on your journey to get to this point where you're at now that, perhaps someone else can think about doing or trying or replicating in their own journey?
Have a conversation. Say out loud what your thoughts are, what you're feeling. Write it out. Like you said, when you're actually speaking to someone about what you're feeling, it just makes it so much more real and it gives you perspective on your situation, right? A lot of times we go through these things, especially as males, we're not really as vulnerable with our feelings and these thoughts of emotion, anxiousness, or whatever that may be. And when it comes to male pattern baldness, it's such a like common thing where people just overlook it, but it really like it can take a grip on you, right? It
Yeah,
can
dude,
have a
for
really
real.
big impact on your life. And if you're going through life just having that conversation in your own head and you're not internalizing it by putting it out into the world, whether it's a conversation with a colleague or a friend, it's a conversation with a loved one, or even you just writing it down. Like one of the things I would do is I would like take videos of myself and I talk to myself. Like I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, here's going now. I wonder what it would be like. And just being able to vocalize that and actually understand what you're feeling can give you better perspective on what you need to do next. I think that's a big thing. It's just have that conversation. I think with the community that you've built, man, there's a lot of people out there willing to have that conversation.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
That would kind of give you guidance on that too, right? So that would be the first thing. And then number two, once you feel that inkling to take the plunge, take the fucking plunge because you will not regret it.